Well, hello there. It is great to see you again, and welcome back to Path to Abundant Living. I am your moderator, Ryan Ruff. It's great to be back with everybody today, and as always, I'll be joined by my right-hand men, and that's Mr. Matt Nordman and Scott Morrison of Morrison Nordman Wealth Management. And we've got a really special episode for you all on tap today. We have a really great guest that's joining us, and that's Mr. Joe Navarro. Joe is an author, a public speaker, and he's a former FBI agent and supervisor. And Joe really specializes in the area of nonverbal communication and body language as a whole. So, as we've had these discussions on this show surrounding elements maybe beyond wealth management, maybe the growth of your professional network, how you carry yourself, how you really establish that professional network and those professional relationships to further enhance your business and your life. Well, we thought Joe would be a phenomenal guest to come on the show today to talk about his expertise in this area of nonverbal communication, body language, his experiences, and how that could all tie into the work that you're doing in your life and your professional world. But first, before we bring Joe on and get into the conversation, let's say hi to the guys. Scott, Matt, it's good to see you this morning. How are you both doing?
Ryan, it's an unbelievable day. Excited for this show. And Scott, how are you doing today?
I'm wonderful. How are you
Wonderful.
guys?
Fantastic.
Yeah, no, doing well, doing well. Excited to jump into today's episode. We've got a great guest, obviously, on tap. Before we bring Joe out and get into all our questions that we've got, Matt, why don't you tee things up for us? How come, how did you guys land on Joe, and how come you wanted to bring him on the show in the first place?
Sure. So for me, I don't know how many years ago, it was at least probably 15-ish, 20 years ago. I remember attending a conference, and they brought someone in who talked about nonverbal communications, body language, and what you can learn and all this other stuff. And it fascinated me. Fast forward a little bit, and then have a group of us who get together for just some friendly poker. And so, being the competitive person I am, you always want to get better. And so you start reading. And one of the books I came across was Joe's book, Read 'em and Reap, with what some would say the greatest tournament poker player in history of Phil Hellmuth. And I was like, well, I got to read this book. And it just continued to open up more and more in my mind of, wow, there's a lot that we all can learn. And so then it was like, well, how can people who are dealing with other professionals, or, hey, you got a contractor, and it's like, is this someone that I can trust, or is there something that I can learn from the interactions that I have with them? Because as Joe will attest to, if you watch or read any of his stuff, we are always giving off some sort of signal. And so, well, why not, speak with the man himself, the expert? And so on top of that, my uncle, so Joe, 25 years FBI, my uncle was in the FBI in Washington, D.C. I don't know what he did. I know he was important, but, so you tie all that stuff together, and I am just very curious and very excited to speak with Joe today.
Well, fantastic. Well, with that, folks, we want to welcome Joe Navarro to the show. Joe, thank you so much for carving some time out of your day to be with us, and welcome to Path to Abundant Living.
It's a great to be here, and it was boy, that is a long way to get me to the show, but I'm very appreciative. You've mentioned some things. Yeah, you're the folks that have served in the FBI in the past, what sacrifices they made, and so a tribute to your relative. And yeah, I still remember working with Phil Hellmuth. That was kind of interesting. Funny story about that. I had written some articles for Psychology Today, and he called me up, and I don't play poker, and he said, I'd like for you to come out and teach at I'm putting on an academy. And I hung up on him because I didn't know who he was. I didn't know that at that time he'd already won 10 bracelets, and he was #1 in the world in winnings. And I was like, I thought it was a joke.
Prank call. It's a prank call. You're being pranked, Joe.
I was being pranked by the best, and his manager called me back and said, "No, this is serious." And that led to writing the book to which you were referring, which yeah, Read 'em and Reap. Interestingly enough, is I did it just as a favor. you never realized that that book would become, for about a year, it was #1 in the world for poker players.
I
I
could.
I hope they benefited from it. I don't know. I don't play poker.
Okay. Well, so, you're always, for lack of a better term, if you are competitive, you're looking for that edge, even if it's just a tiny little edge. And, probably, speaking with Phil, I don't, how much he would say, but, if you can get that edge, that's the difference between winning and losing.
Well, absolutely, and in fact, he told me his takeaways from that, and actually, their takeaways for negotiations. One of the things that we talked about was that if you if you if you hold very still at the table, and he does that. He does what we call the perch. He just sort of settles down, and people sort of ignore you. And it's great for poker, but it's not very good for negotiations and even for online communications. You and I, Matt, we were talking earlier about um, how things have changed. We've gone from being in the same room, um, and and I think we're getting back to that, but not in the same way. Um, I'm seeing more and more events which are half virtual, half present. But one of the things we learned as a result of COVID and everybody turning to a virtual environment was how essential it was to have good production quality. That the camera that came with your computer was probably not as good as it should be. That using a 4K camera, using lighting, using a speaker or a microphone to enhance your voice contributed to keeping your audience. And something so simple as not realizing that for the last 70 years, television always had the person on TV, whether it was Walter Cronkite or any of those folks, that they never took up more than a fourth of the screen. And come COVID, and then all of a sudden everybody has their face right into the screen. We're looking at nose hairs and things, and it just turned ugly there for a while. And the great experiment that took place was that all of a sudden companies like yourself, where your clients are important, they were making assessments as to quality, as to competence, as to truthfulness, veracity. As I said, the big one, confidence, based on their observations. And it was a real eye opener, and we saw dramatically the numbers, which we could, for the first time, measure. Because as you said, it's one thing is to get together at a hotel, everybody gets invited to your city, and you have 4 or 5 presenters, and you have a nice convivial meeting, and people feel obligated to stay throughout the event. When we went virtual, that went out the door. People were starting to sign off as early as 7 minutes if the production quality wasn't there. And that was a real shakeup. I remember a lot of companies contacting me and saying, "How do we fix this?" And saying, "Yeah, we've gone from giving presentations to giving performances." And a lot of people said, "Well, we weren't hired for that." When I said, "Congratulations, you now have a new skill set to learn," because people can now just tune you off so easily that it really is a game changer. It really is a game changer.
No, it definitely is. And so if we can take just one step back, and so for the layperson who doesn't know anything about this,
Yeah.
you just kind of get into a little bit about the nonverbal communications that we are all giving off every second of every day.
Every
and
second.
what that means.
Yeah. Great question. I probably should have started with that because I think most people understand body language. Obviously that's the gestures that we use, the expressions of the face, and so forth. But nonverbals goes beyond that. Nonverbals is the umbrella that covers that thin slice of body language. And nonverbals really are anything that communicates, but is not a word. And so the background behind me, how I'm dressed, these are considered nonverbals. My tone of voice, what we call prosody, is a nonverbal. The things that I attach to myself, whether I'm using my favorite fountain pen or my favorite cheap pencil, these things communicate. And really, the first great experiment that took place in the last century dealing with nonverbals was the first televised debate between President-elect Kennedy and Vice President Nixon. And at that 1960 event, something happened that kept social scientists studying for a long time. Those who listened on the radio were adamant that Richard Nixon won, and rightfully so. He was the more experienced statesman. He'd been around for a long time. He was vice president. But the magic happened when the cameras came on, and there was Kennedy, about an inch taller, handsome. He was wearing a bespoke suit. He was very casual, very at ease, very friendly. And the audience said, no, Kennedy won by a factor of 2, twice as many people. And for the first time, social scientists said, well, wait a minute, we all listen to the same words, but it was the nonverbals, the casualness, the friendliness, the fact that he wore makeup. Nixon refused to wear makeup. Kennedy said, bring it on.
Didn't Nixon have a 5 o'clock shadow as well, right?
Nixon had a 5 o'clock shadow. He was nursing a cold, but he just didn't want to be touched. And he just didn't realize that he had to go from what Kennedy realized was to go from a presentation to a performance. Kennedy got it. In the same way that we look at young people on TikTok, and we may joke about them, but some of them have 1 million followers, but you look at their production quality, and you say, oh, they're putting on makeup. They've got not 1, 2, but 3 ring lights. They're using a 4K camera. And I try to convince people, most of my clients are in the financial sector, and I try to tell my clients, gang, you got to get your act together. If you're using the camera that came with your laptop, you got to elevate this, because the people on TikTok with 1 million viewers, they get it. And they're using studio quality microphones. And so it's that was the big revelation about how much we needed to change, and this transition. And a lot of companies, and I admire JP Morgan, Mary Erdos and her folks, and Capital Group out of California. I've worked with all of them. They got it immediately. Yeah, I mean, immediately they were buying microphones, cameras, whatever, elevating their game, and with the mindset that the game has changed. It's no more presentations. We have to do performances, and the time frame. When I started working with, for instance, J.P. Morgan, usually people would be brought in to talk about a product or a service. They would get an hour. 18 minutes is now all you get. Those days are over. If you can't sell your product in 18 minutes, well, you just don't stand a chance.
Well, we live in a microwave society, right? And if it doesn't happen quickly, and like you were talking about, whether it's the quality, if I'm surprised you get 18 minutes, I would have thought it would be even less than that. So
yeah, no, it's right at that 18-minute mark. That's it. And I mean, you're talking about some products that are very complex, and obviously the sort of sales pitch is done in 18 minutes, and then you have the potential for breakout sessions so that further details are broken out. But we call that the TED Talk effect. Most TED Talks are 12 minutes, and forget about having a lectern. if you have to read, if you have to stand behind an object to give your presentation, wow, it's like you're hurting. And I work with individuals and I coach them, and you just try to get in their head and say, yeah, I know how we used to do it. Those days are over.
yeah,
They're over. Slides that were complicated, now it's the Steve Jobs method. One word or one picture, but that's it.
yeah.
To your point, Joe, one of the things that I've certainly learned, I'm 63 myself, and I have a client base who's a little bit older, and so before COVID, it would have been unheard of to have a Zoom meeting, having where my clients had the expectation of always seeing me face to face, and we always were able to have conversations, see each other's gestures and things like that. So to sell the idea of a Zoom call, the production quality had to be really well. You kind of joked about the nose hairs, but that's the kind of thing people, when they're sitting in front of you, notice. And they want to know when they're having a conversation with you that they can see your mannerisms, and they can see your smile, and they can see you showing attention to what they're talking about. This isn't going to happen on a phone call, and it certainly wasn't going to happen any other kind of old video type of production.
Yeah, Scott, I think you're spot on. The takeaways that your clients are taking is they're still looking at you to see if you're friendly. They're still looking at you to see if you're engaged. They're still relying on your words to be sure. Obviously, we have advice for them and so forth. But trustworthiness, we still assess by looking at each other. We assess competence and confidence in the same way. So I think even though the medium now is this small, and our gestures now have to go from out here to here. So when we're talking to the clients, we have to limit those gestures. We can still use them powerfully to convey structure, to convey strength, to convey that we have well thought this out. We can still do it that way, but we can also use our faces, head tilt, to say, I'm engaged, I'm listening to what you're saying. We can arch the eyes to greet, to reward them. When they say something interesting, oh, wow, I didn't think about that, or yeah, that's a good point. We can use these gestures, and even though they don't see all of the body, we can still do a lot. And it is true. In one of my books, I think it was in Be Exceptional, I talk about that the primacy of communication as adults is first visual, then then vocal, so tone of voice, then verbal, the words that we use, and last haptics or touch. Now, obviously, we can't shake hands over the over this environment, but we're still influenced by what we see. We're still influenced by the tone of voice, what we call prosody, um, how we how we sound, the pitch, whether we talk with cadence or we machine gun information. Then we have words, and obviously we can't touch, but we can approximate that by the kinds of things we say as we terminate, by saying, "Hey, it was really great to see you. Let's do this again." Um, and I really appreciate your time. So we can make up for some of that, not perfectly, but good enough. But it's this is a medium that's not going to go away. I just came from California, where I can't say the corporation. It's a huge corporation. They're in the news, advertising, and writing business. Fully 76% of their staff now works from home.
Wow.
That is huge. I was at their headquarters, and I just couldn't. I was looking around like, and I thought, have all these people, as they say in England, been made redundant? And they said, no, they're fully employed, but they're working from home. And but we have every morning we have a meeting, every afternoon we have a meeting, and it's all virtual. And we've learned to manage it. So it's not going to go away. I think in the financial sector, because of the way the financial sector works, where there's a lot of mentoring, and you learn so much just by being with each other. I think it's going to take a lot longer to have those kinds of percentages, but I think virtual will be with us for a long time.
So let me ask you this. So in the setting like that, and in your TED Talk, one of the things that you would indicate is that making people comfortable and being empathetic, that's the real significance to be able to identify the nonverbal cues. So whether it's face to face, like we're in the same room, versus Zoom, are there differences, or what should people be doing and or looking for in those situations?
Yeah. Here's one, Matt. It's really easy. Just turn sideways a little bit. So
Really?
you're straight on to. There you go. So just that behavior alone guarantees more face time than if you were looking straight ahead. By just looking straight ahead, the way you were sitting, eventually it wears on my brain, right? We know this from the research, that even if you angled a little bit more, so just angle a little bit more, you're still looking at me, but your shoulders are, there you go. Just that guarantees that I will listen to you longer than if you stood in front of me like a drill sergeant.
That's fascinating to me.
Listen, trust me, it's worth a
Oh,
lot
I
of
do.
money.
I do. Listen,
I'm sure some of our clients who are business owners who are in negotiations, and that'll be a great takeaway from this.
oh,
It's a great
fantastic.
takeaway, but think about it. When we're confrontational, we square up on people, right? Our shoulders are square. We look like drill sergeants, and I tell this to parents. Don't be surprised if this is how you have every conversation with your spouse or every conversation with your child. Don't be surprised when they become teenagers and they don't really want to talk to you too much. From an anthropological standpoint, primates, and we are primates, only approach each other directly when there's tension or there's going to be a fight and so forth. and we are hominins, the best way to get along is to approach each other at angles and maintain angles. And by doing that, that actually increases face time. Number one, it increases the comfort discomfort. So we have more positive, what we call valence in psychology, but it also releases those hormones that contribute to social harmony, like oxytocin. The minute you square up on somebody and you're staring them down, cortisol begins to erode away at you, and limits the amount of time. So just that alone. The other thing we can do is use more head tilt as you're listening to a person. Just a little bit of head tilt as you're pondering or considering what they're saying at a subconscious level says, what you have to say is important to me. And even though I may have an agenda, I'm putting it on hold while I listen to you. Just a little head tilt. And so, in essence, your body language is rewarding them for talking. Not something we get every day, right?
Very true.
Our siblings, our co-partners, whatever, we don't always get that. And so it's so encouraging when you finally, in the presence of somebody that sits there and tilts their head and just ponders about what you have to say. And then, of course, arching of the eyebrows that we're impressed or that we are receiving it. And I always teach that, and it's a verbal thing, that one of the easiest things that we can do is, and whenever somebody says something, to a large extent, we can always agree, but also add. And if we can't agree and add, at least be agreeable. So somebody says, "Oh, parking downtown is really tough." It really is. I wish it weren't so. Maybe one day we'll have these helicopters that'll move us. All right, so you've agreed and you've added. Let's say they say something controversial that you don't agree with. It's well, downtown is going downhill. It's, you could easily go down that route, but you could also be agreeable and at least just say, I know what you're saying, but hopefully in our office you'll find some refuge. So at least you're being agreeable. So
Yeah.
Agree and add anytime you can, especially with our clients. And if you can't do that, at least be agreeable, so that this concept of anytime they see Scott, anytime they see Matt, and these people are in your presence, they walk away with a high degree of comfort, and that alone can contribute to your success.
Joe,
Okay.
I've heard Stephen Covey, the author, use the phrase "listen to understand" rather than "listen to reply." Seems like that's a big challenge in today's society, with the need to be relevant across all the different social media avenues that we have, and how something as simple as politics has always been a hot button with people, but the fact that we can have this machine gun conversation, as you called it, where we're really not trying to understand each other, but we're just replying as quickly as we can to get our point across, because we have a platform by which to do it now. What are your thoughts in that regard?
Well, I'm glad you asked, because and this isn't to show off, but Stephen Covey was one of my professors at Brigham Young University when I was there in 1971 and 72. He wasn't famous then. In fact, what he was famous for was this. He always my only takeaway from a semester was always have a 3x5 card and write your notes on there. But maybe that's more a reflection on me. But he was a great professor. He was big on listening, and obviously politics weren't what they were then. I started to notice this a few years ago when I had a photograph of a behavior. And I was at an event, and somebody raised their hand in the audience and said, "What party are you?" I go, "What do you mean?" And then he said, "Well, are you this party or that party?" And I said, "Why are you asking?" He says, "Well, why are you using that photograph?" I said, "Because it was free and on the internet." It's like I didn't. I started to realize, and it's only gone downhill ever since. I think we have to be, obviously, these things trend, and I think nowadays we have to be careful as to what we say and what we claim to agree with or not. Obviously the easiest thing is always I always try to avoid politics and religion. I'm not smart enough to have the eloquence to convince anybody either in politics or religion. So why would I say anything? I tell people, I've read thousands of books. I do that to help me educate others, but I'm never there to convince. I'm there to convey, and I just leave it at that. I have no. I never try to convince anybody of anything. People are, people are very peculiar when it comes to beliefs. And so, but I think we can provide a platform where people can be heard. But at the same time, I have heard of instances where at financial meetings, somebody's tried to hijack the meeting to insert some sort of political statement. And that's something that future generations may have to deal with. But I think it's a good policy to the extent that we can.
Yeah. So
to listen and be empathetic. But I always say, folks, I'm not here to convince. I'm here to convey.
So Joe, when you're conveying, or someone else is,
yeah,
you've done over 13,000 interviews.
Yes.
And I know your answer, but I know there's a lot of people who would love to know your answer.
Yeah.
So to be able to tell when someone's lying, is it touching the face, clutching the throat, or looking up to the left or looking up to the right? So what is the one thing? So when someone's talking to someone and they say, "Oh, I pick up on it," what's that thing?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. If you had asked me that question when I first entered into law enforcement in 1974, I would have said, "Oh, my sergeant at the academy said that if you scratch your nose as you're talking, you're lying." The truth is, and there's ample research beginning in 1986 with the work of Paul Ekman, Bella DePaulo, Judy Burgoon, Mark Frank, Joe Coulis, David Givens, and even some of my own work, because after retiring from the FBI, I got involved in doing research. There is no Pinocchio effect. There is no single behavior indicative of deception. Humans, we evolved to be deceptive. we actually cannot be honest at all times, and so we learn to mask behaviors. We cannot say to a mother, "Boy, that is one ugly child you just gave birth to." It doesn't sell in any culture. It doesn't, no matter how ugly that child is. And of course, the first day they're all ugly, and then they become beautiful. And even in the FBI, it wasn't something that I really thought a lot about, because in the FBI we have to prove everything that both the witness says and the suspect says. We have to corroborate it, because if we don't, defense attorney is going to say, "Well, how do you know that?" "Well, she said she could see it from that corner." "Did you go to the corner and see if she could actually see the bank robber?" No. And now your testimony is out the window. What I try to use nonverbals for is, number one, is to establish control, to let the other person know that I'm in control of the situation, and that I have the authority to go forward. Number two is to establish some sort of comfort, so that the person begins to you're never going to have a perfect baseline. And I'm partly to blame for this. I always talk about, it's great to have a baseline. Well, anytime somebody's in front of you, that affects your baseline behaviors. The only real way to get baseline behaviors is to put a nanny cam hidden in the house and watch you during the day. That's the true way. But to get you somewhere to norm, so that if I ask you a question, do you own a Smith and Wesson 38 Model K? Does that question cause you stress? Does it cause you concern? Do we see it because you do a hard swallow? Are you covering your neck? Things like that. It's not so much deception. It's more about, does the question and your response to it cause you psychological discomfort? And if it does, why is that? Now, in my book, What Everybody Is Saying, which well, it's in its 12th or 13th year. It's still number one in the world. Shockingly, because I was told by the editor that we would be lucky if we had 6 months shelf life with a book like that. So be careful with the prognosticators, right? And I told my wife that.
Sounds like an economic forecaster.
Yeah. I'll never forget it. He called, he says, "Joe, just, don't get too excited. If we get 6 months out of this, we'll be happy." I said, "Oh, okay." So I set the bar really low. When we, there's a case I talk about in the book where I went to look for a fugitive at this house. The mother was there. And when I mentioned, "Is it possible that your son is hiding in the house?" that was the only time she covered her neck and would touch her neck. And so the question, and I repeated that experiment 3 times with her. That question was causing her psychological discomfort. And sure enough, we got permission from her, and hiding in the closet was her son.
Wow.
Well, wow, I lucked out that day because he had a gun on him, and
Yeah.
I could have easily been blown away. I was not very careful. But my point is this: people think that we look for deception. I say, don't look for deception. Look for how well people answer questions. Look how much detail or lack of detail. Account for all time and for all behavior. When you and I, and when Ryan, Matt, Scott, when we're doing due diligence about investments, yeah, we listen to what the person says. We look at what they put out, but then we ask questions. And from those questions, we have to ask ourselves, are we satisfied? Is there something here that makes me feel a little unsure? We have to listen to our bodies. Gavin de Becker in the 1980s wrote The Gift of Fear, a great book. Everybody should read that. Any child going to college should read that book. And now we know that so much more. We know that both the heart, the brain, the heart and the stomach have neurons, the very same neurons that we have in the brain, and that through the vagal system, bilaterally, we are innervated through the vagus nerve, that the stomach and the heart and the lungs communicate, and the throat through the vagus nerve, and that oftentimes that gut feeling that we have, that restrained chest and so forth, that gut feeling that we feel is actually the subconscious revealing that something's not right. And I think you may look at it as illogical. I look at it as, no, this is the way we evolved as a species, to listen to the body, that is the subconscious, that is processing far more information than you can ever process. And we have to listen to that, not for deception, but is there something about this that it causes us anxiety, concern, or it just seems incredulous? And I fear that a lot of people now leave due diligence to they outsource it. They outsource it rather than do it themselves, rather than ask those hard questions. And I've been with clients who were making major investments, one of them in Manhattan. And there was just something about the meeting. They invited me, so one of the questions that I had them repeat had to do with mitigation of, I forget the term now, but there had been issues with fungus infestation, and in the past. And as I looked at the three people on the other side, you could see nothing but psychological discomfort. There was a lot of facial distortion and so forth. And it's a simple question. It either happened or it didn't happen, right? Why should a simple question cause so much of this? And that's why I wrote the book, The Dictionary of Body Languages. Is anytime you start to see facial distortion, somebody has to answer a question by first throwing their jaw in one direction, or using hidden pacifiers, or biting their lip. We don't know the truth, but I can tell you this: there's an issue. And it's up to me to figure out what is that issue. And sure enough, and my client had to walk away from this because the issue of just how much fungus and stuff was in the building really made this a poor choice for investment. And they were hiding it. Clearly, they were hiding it.
So I've read both those books from Gavin de Becker, and I agree that everyone should read it. And clearly, what you do is extremely helpful, and it's evident. Like, your editor saying, "Oh, maybe get 6 months." No, I think it's very obvious why, because we all are trying to learn more and more as much as we can, right? And now that what is it? Peacock has that show out. I don't know if you've heard about that, Poker Face, right? And can't tell the truth, but I know when you're lying. And so whether that's true or not, but it's, again, to us, this is very fascinating information, and very appreciative, and want to be respectful of your time. Again, like, as I mentioned when we were talking earlier, I I could talk to you all day, but I know again, we want to be respectful of your time.
Well, thanks. Well, this way you can have me back. So if there's still questions lingering out there, um, yeah. What I would tell you, because I know your clients are important to you, um, and you can tell when someone cares about your clients, that they're not just numbers and so forth. And we can learn that. We deduce that based on nonverbals. We don't say trust me. We don't say I like you. We demonstrate it, and so I think if you uh, adopt those best behaviors that communicate interest, empathy, competence, warmth, but also strength. I think that goes a long way, whether it's your industry or any other industry.
Well, again, we appreciate your time, and we you put the offer out there, so you got to be careful because we might be back in touch.
Joe,
Well, Joe,
I wanted to thank you too, Joe. It was great to have you here today.
It's my pleasure. It's been fun.
and Joe, I understand that you do some consulting work in this space of nonverbal communication. For anybody out there in our audience that enjoyed the conversation, maybe took something away from it, what's the best way they could learn more about you online, or find you, or even open up a dialogue with you?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Yeah, you can. Most of my stuff, just go to joenavarro.net, and that takes you right to my company website. And I do one-on-one coaching. I do stuff with teams, and yeah, it's always my pleasure to engage the public out there. So thanks for this great opportunity, guys.
And we can hire you in a big negotiation then, right?
Your competitors do. Just saying.
Fair point. Well, Joe, again, we appreciate you stopping by and being with us, and hopefully we'll have you back on Path to Abundant Living. Thanks so much.
All right.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks a lot,
Joe.
guys. Have a great day.
Alrighty, folks. Joe Navarro, author, public speaker, former FBI agent and supervisor specializing in nonverbal communication and body language. What a guest. A lot of value out there on the table. Guys, I want to get your takeaways from, some of the key messages that Joe shared with us today. Matt, why don't you lead off for us? What'd you think?
It was fascinating. Again, as I said, and I could talk about, read about, learn about this stuff because it is fascinating. Like he says, we are constantly giving off nonverbal cues, not only just physically, but like he said, well, if you're doing a Zoom, well, what's behind you, or what's in view of people, and how do you act, and just all that stuff. The takeaway is, really not be overly aware, but be aware of, how you are with people, and just, don't be fake trying to be something that you aren't, but know that, okay, you can be able to see what others are doing and go, oh, maybe there is a red flag there, or no, what, this is somebody that is truly genuine and does care about me or what it is that we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And Scott, what were some of the big takeaways for you on your end?
Well, I think that, from my own perspective, obviously sitting down with a client, it makes you more self-conscious about what kind of nonverbals you're getting off. But at the same time, the refreshing part of it was, when he kept talking about empathy, genuineness, integrity, things that you naturally give off good nonverbals when you're being that person.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
So it in that way, I think, does it give us some clues or cues if we're sitting down with somebody, not in respect to a client, but to another professional who I'm deciding on whether I want to work with? Certainly it's giving me some more quivers, and to be able to figure out if I'm reading somebody correctly. But at the same time, I just come away from it thinking, genuine conversation is and honesty is what this is all about. And anything we can do to be more aware of our own nonverbals as well as other people's is only going to, help in that regard.
Absolutely.
You? What'd you take away, Ryan?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd probably marry your two school of thoughts and takeaways. I loved when he started when Joe was sharing about actively listening. The head tilt. And what that shows to the individual that is speaking to you. In that, yes, of course, we all have thoughts of our own on how we want to respond or where we might want to take the conversation next. But it was very interesting to know that that little head tilt, that making an audible or just some sort of visualization to the person that is speaking, that you are intently listening and you're putting your thoughts on hold to be able to listen, to internalize, and better yet, maybe even shift what you were gonna maybe originally say back to them. Maybe it's, hold on, I like that school of thought. Let's take that and run with it in terms of the conversation, and maybe not what I had on my agenda and where I wanted to take the conversation. So I love the idea of that active listening and kind of the way you can position your body and give out those nonverbal cues to show that you are listening. Because it's amazing. I'm sure you guys have plenty of experiences in your lives where where somebody said, I really appreciate you listening to me in that moment, whether it was about a breakup, about a piece of investment, any sort of kind of hard-hitting conversation. When somebody knows that the other person is actively listening, I think that conversation as a whole becomes infinitely more valuable. So that was really cool to see. But I agree, Matt. I mean, Joe's fascinating, the work that he's been doing. I'm sure he's got countless stories that we could sit around and talk about. So maybe we will have to have him back on for a future episode.
Agree.
Awesome. Well, gentlemen, look, I really appreciate you both, of course, as always, carving time out of your days. Guys, one final time, though, for anybody that enjoys the conversations that we have on this show, maybe they want to reach out directly to you guys. What is the best way they can get in touch with your team to have one of these maybe wealth management discussions?
Yeah, so the traditional way, phone call 517-333-7967 or our website, morrisonnordman.com.
Fantastic. Well, look, Matt, Scott, I appreciate you both. I'll let you get back to serving your clients and doing what you do best, but we'll see you back here for the next one.
All right. Have a great day, Ryan. Scott, see you soon.
All right.
All righty, folks. And hey, look, we want to take one final moment, as we always do, and thank you for stopping by and being a part of the show today. If you did enjoy today's discussion surrounding these nonverbal communication skills and body language with Joe Navarro, and you enjoyed today's conversation, you took something away from it, make sure you hit that subscribe button then on whichever platform you checked us out on. That way you never miss out on a future conversation where Matt, Scott, and I dive into these unique wealth management discussions, or really just interpersonal and life strategy discussion. We ultimately want to provide value here on the show, and by subscribing, you'll never miss out on a future episode. So for Scott and Matt, I'm Ryan. We're going to go ahead and say so long, but we appreciate you stopping by and being with us on Path to Abundant Living.